My name is Professor Thomas Dolby, and I teach an undergraduate degree course in music composition for film and games at the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, Maryland. Under normal circumstances, I would be in my lab right now at an elite US university with a brilliant group of students. But these are not normal circumstances, and so I am self-isolating here in my closet. All those people over the years that have asked if they could sit in on my classes, well, here is your chance. If you are a closet film or game composer, if you're a movie buff, or just curious, sit back and enjoy a free sample in Peabody Music for New Media. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll be working on a couple of simple comedy composition assignments. The first is beat-driven, the second is more orchestral. This week we're going to ask the question, what makes stuff funny? I think it was the great stage actor Sir Edmund what's-his-name who said on his deathbed, "Dying is easy, comedy is hard." Well, he may as well have been talking about comedy music, because even the most seasoned Hollywood film composers will tell you that writing for comedy is really tricky. Part of the problem is that we each perceive humour in a different way. In Germany, they worship Monty Python, but the French dig Jerry Lewis. Your grandparents probably think the Three Stooges are hilarious, but you're more into the Big Bang Theory or the Mighty Boosh. There's almost no genre which does as much to underline the differences between cultures and generations. When I mention scoring for comedy, probably the first sound that pops into your head is circus music. Well, circus music is great in some contexts. Danny Elfman is a master. But my best advice to you is this: if you really want to be funny, be serious. Comedy music has evolved radically over the course of 100+ years of Hollywood filmmaking. To understand how we got to where we are today, you have to go back in history. In the 1890s, when film began, audiences were freaked out by the spectral faces on their screens flickering at 6 frames a second. Music calmed them. Plus, it had the added benefit of muffling the sound of those clanky projectors that were usually in the same room as the audiences. The first stars of silent films were vaudeville performers, clowns and comedians like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, but they used a lot of pathos in their films as well. And the film studios used to send out sheet music or just suggestions sometimes to the cinemas, because each cinema hired its own musicians, so they'd be told to use a bit of heroic music here, a bit of pathos there. Then, of course, in the 1920s, music was added to a stripe on the side of a film along with dialogue, and that brought about a change in the types of performance that were popular. You had teams now, people like Laurel and Hardy, the Marx Brothers. You got a combination of the sight gags of the slapstick era with fast-talking wise guys. By the mid-20th century, many comedies had vaguely feel-good music playing constantly in the background.
You'd only wait while I explain. I just gave you my picture. Oh, you've torn your coat. Oh. Now, I didn't do it on purpose. Not right. That's not right. It's not my fault. I didn't mean to do it. I just did it, but I didn't mean to do it. I just caught hold of your coat.
Look, will you do something for me?
A needle?
No, it's simpler than that. Let's play a game.
Oh? What?
Well, watch. I'll put my hand over my eyes, and then you go away.
Mm-hmm.
See? Mm-hmm. Then I'll count to 10, and when I take my hand down, you will be gone. 1.
Well, I like that. I was only trying to be nice.
Thank you.
A very different style of scoring was developed by Walt Disney and Warner Brothers in the cartoons that they made. They introduced a style of scoring where every single action and gesture on the screen was matched by a flourish or a glissando in the orchestra.
Are you okay, Tom? Speak to me, pal. Speak to me.
This mind-blowing orchestral technique was known as Mickey Mousing, and it got used in some serious films as well, from King Kong onwards. It's still around, although these days it's generally frowned upon. With the arrival of special effects and prosthetic makeup, we got new styles of movies, fantasies like Mary Poppins, cross-dressing capers like Some Like It Hot, Tootsie, Mrs. Doubtfire. Later in the century, we got ensemble casts in unexpected settings, situation comedies where you put your heroes up shit creek and then throw bricks at them. Things like Blazing Saddles, Caddyshack and Ghostbusters. These escapist farces were in stark contrast to the more serious movement in filmmaking that dealt with tougher subjects like race, politics, the nuclear threat and the Vietnam War. Needless to say, movies like Caddyshack didn't garner many Oscar Best Score nominations. The legacy of those Walt Disney and Warner Brothers cartoons carried over into today's blockbuster animated series like Toy Story and Shrek, and then you've got road movies, buddy movies like Dumb and Dumber or The Wedding Crashers. You've got romantic comedies. I guess almost anything that makes us feel uncomfortable gives us a good titter. Plus we get a good laugh out of the underdog making good still. Even the current DC Marvel phenomenon, although you think of it as action-adventure, there's a lot of warmth and plenty of belly laughs along the way. What's common to all of these is that the music tells you exactly what to feel. But then there's the dark side. Cover your eyes if you're squeamish.
Something ain't right. I'm so scared in case I fall off my chair, and I'm wondering how I'll get down the stairs. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. Yes, I'm stuck in the middle, and I'm wondering what it is I should do. It's so hard to keep this smile from my face.
Modern styles of comedy, let's call them turn-of-the-century styles, encompass the black humour of Quentin Tarantino, parody, spoof, kitsch, featuring Baltimore's own John Waters, Austin Powers, and Edward Scissorhands.
Have you ever cut a woman's hair? Would you cut mine?
Reality TV has made its mark too, with mockumentaries like Spinal Tap, Best in Show, or Borat.
This is Natalia.
Does art imitate life or the other way around? I always get confused.
She is my sister.
Almost all comedy is about juxtaposition. You've got fugitives from the mob ending up in a sleeper car with an all-girl jazz band. You've got a con man in a parrot shop, or vicious hitmen discussing cheeseburgers and foot rubs. And comedy scoring is about juxtaposition as well, the juxtaposition of the absurd. So I'll say it again, if you really want to be funny, be serious. As a film composer, you need to learn how to summon up a variety of different moods. You'll find certain sounds that match up with different scales and chord sequences that will create a mood that is, for example, optimistic, playful or childlike, mischievous. You'll get a sort of sixth sense as to whether a given scene needs stop-start music or whether it would play better with something that's beat-driven. But as always in film music, less is more.
Ketu? Ketu?
Using a specific genre can work really well. You've got light orchestral, a bit of jazz never goes amiss, but try something like trad or ragtime, something retro. If you're going to go contemporary, you have to be careful because if you do something like dubstep or reggaeton, what's hip today can become cliched very quickly. Eventually it turns into retro. You could try something timeless like polka or klezmer or mariachi, but do be careful of cultural appropriation. So, who gets to decide what's funny and what's not? Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Composer, but it ain't you. It's the boss, the director, the showrunner, the game designer, because when you do music for new media, there's always a client, a customer, and the customer's always right.
The boy, Mark, is on his bicycle. It opens with him looking for his friend's house, and it's all kind of internal. His friend hasn't turned up at school for a while. It's kind of a mystery.
What you need to do is get in a room with the director, or probably these days a Zoom meeting, and you need to understand what the director wants. What are the key pivot points in the scene? How should the audience feel watching this? Whose point of view are we following? Are we inside the hero's head, or are we watching from afar? Are we laughing with or at the characters? A good question to ask the director is, do they want you to enhance or contradict what we're seeing on the screen? Perhaps there's a subtext. Maybe the audience knows something that the hero does not.
Does your dog bite? No? Oh. Nice doggy. I thought you said your dog did not bite.
That is not my dog.
Okay, so let's move on to this week's assignment. We are going to be rescoring a scene from Spider-Man 3. Rescoring is a technique that is actually very helpful for film music students because it's the next best thing to an actual Hollywood gig. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a mock spotting session, and I'm going to put on my director's hat and channel my inner Sam Raimi, and I'm going to spot this movie with you. So this is a scene from the movie where Spider-Man has bonded with an alien parasite called Venom, and he's walking down the Fifth Avenue. And what's funny about this scene is that he thinks he's hot, but we know that Peter is really just a dweeb. And so the music that we're hearing is really the internal soundtrack in Peter's head, and nobody else can hear it. And we as the audience, we need to laugh and cringe at the same time. So all of the moves that Peter is doing are kind of choreographed to this internal soundtrack that only he can hear. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some temp pieces that my editor put in here, and this will help give you an idea, I hope, of the kind of thing that I want. None of them is quite perfect, and I know that you can do a better job. So let me show you what we did. All right, here is the first piece.
How you doing?
All right, so the beat is good, the vibe is good, but here's the problem. I can't hear that lovely Foley and Waller that my sound department did, all of those has and oohs and so on, because those are kind of neat. And so it's too noisy, you know, it's got a good vibe to it, but it's too noisy, and plus it almost feels like Peter's made a bunch of money, but it's more about money than it is about sex. So I need something that is a bit more spacious, leaves a bit more space. So let's try the next one.
How you doing?
Okay, this is cool, but the problem with this is that it's kitsch, and we're sort of laughing along with Peter at the ridiculousness of the whole situation. We're not inside Peter's head, which is what I wanted. I need to get at his internal soundtrack. So let's move on to the next piece.
How you doing?
This piece is much better. It's got good space to it, which I like very much. Now I can hear the dialogue track, and it's sexy, it's good. Yeah, this is a lot closer to what I want. Now, it almost lines up with some of the dance moves, but I know that when you do it, you can actually make it perfect, like he is actually choreographing to the music. All right, let's hear one more piece. This is pretty good too. Yep, I like this. This is hip. I'd go either with this one or with the previous one. Different rhythms, right? They both work pretty well. Some sort of hybrid between the two. Whatever you can do to make everything line up. Okay, so I'm now unbonded with Sam Raimi. I'm back to your old prof again, and you know your assignment. You need to find the clip on YouTube, do a search for Spider-Man realistic audio. You need to calculate the tempo of your piece based on the moves that Peter is doing. You need to mark the key hit points, like when he does the slide, when he re-emerges from the store. You need to pick a style and the instruments that go with it. You need to compose an original cue and send it to me as a QuickTime movie, tdolby1@jh.edu. Then next week in part 2, we're going to dive into the orchestral stuff, and I'm going to show you how to set about writing it. So stay tuned for next week's episode, when we'll be playing around with some fart sounds and penny whistles and all sorts of wonderfulness. I want to just give a brief shout out to all the people and copyright holders whose clips I have appropriated for this class, including MGM, Sony Columbia Pictures, Danny Elfman, Tim Burton, Henry Mancini, and the brilliant Extreme.com music library, which is run by my mate Russell Emanuel in London. So I hope you've enjoyed your free sample of Peabody New Media. If you want to find out more about this 4-year undergraduate degree course in composing music for film and games, go to peabody.jhu.edu. See you next time.